Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine millions of people around the world. They're taking multiple medications, doing everything right, and yet their high blood pressure just won't come down.
Yeah.
It's a huge, frustrating challenge in healthcare,
Yeah.
leaving them vulnerable to heart attacks, strokes, and other, serious issues.
It really is. Hypertension, high blood pressure, it's incredibly common, something like 1 in 3 adults globally.
Wow.
And like you said, even with all the treatments we have, a large percentage, the sources suggest over 40% worldwide, they just don't reach their target blood pressure.
So what if there was a fundamentally new way to tackle this, a different tool for the toolbox?
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what we're diving into today. We're pulling insights from a recent health news article and also a really detailed scientific paper published in a major medical journal looking at this potential new drug called Lorundrostat.
Right, and our mission for this deep dive is basically to figure out what these sources reveal about this drug. Like, how does it work? What did the latest large studies actually find about its effectiveness, its safety, and maybe most importantly, what could this potentially mean for you or someone you know who's struggling with high blood pressure that just won't budge?
All right, let's start maybe by understanding the problem a bit better. We know high blood pressure is common, it's dangerous, but why is it so resistant to treatment in some people?
Well, the sources point pretty clearly to a key factor, dysregulated aldosterone.
Aldosterone.
Yeah, it's a hormone. Your adrenal glands make it, and it plays this major role in controlling blood pressure. But in maybe 30% of people with hypertension, this hormone isn't regulated properly.
And when aldosterone is out of whack, specifically too high, what does that actually do inside the body?
Well, it basically tells your kidneys to hold on to sodium and water,
Okay.
which increases the volume of fluid in your bloodstream, and that drives up blood pressure. High aldosterone levels can also damage blood vessels directly and contribute to problems like heart failure and kidney disease down the line.
Yeah.
So for a lot of people, this persistently high blood pressure, it's actually driven by this hormone being improperly regulated.
Okay, so here's where this new approach gets really interesting then. Our sources describe Lorundrostat as belonging to a completely novel class of drugs.
Yes, it's what's called an aldosterone synthase inhibitor. And this is a different strategy compared to some of the older drugs that also target the aldosterone system.
How is it different? What does aldosterone synthase inhibitor actually, mean in practice?
Okay, think of aldosterone production like a little assembly line in the body. And there's a specific enzyme, it's called cytochrome P450-11b2 or CYP11b2, that does the final step in making the hormone.
Right.
Now, older drugs like mineralocorticoid receptor antagonists, they work by blocking where the finished aldosterone tries to act in the body, they block its receptor.
Okay.
Lorundrostat, however, works much earlier. It targets and blocks that specific enzyme, that CYP11b2, essentially stopping the assembly line from producing too much aldosterone in the first place.
So it's like stopping the factory from making the hormone rather than just trying to block it at its destination.
Exactly. You hit the factory itself. The aim is to lower the overall aldosterone levels circulating in the body.
Right.
And the idea, according to the sources anyway, is that this more direct approach might lead to better blood pressure lowering and potentially fewer side effects than just blocking the receptor downstream. Because sometimes blocking the receptor can actually cause the body to ramp up aldosterone production to try and compensate.
I see. That makes sense. Okay, so we have this novel mechanism. The next obvious step is seeing if it actually works in people. The sources talk about some key clinical trials. Tell us about those.
Okay, so the news article we looked at highlighted initial results from the Launch-HTN trial. This one's described as the largest phase 3 trial of an aldosterone synthase inhibitor for hypertension completed so far.
Phase 3, okay. Big deal.
Yeah, big deal. Global study designed to be very much like the real world. So people stayed on their existing blood pressure meds, anywhere from 2 up to 5 different ones.
Right.
And blood pressure was measured routinely in the doctor's office using those automated devices.
And the early word from that trial sounds promising.
It does, yeah. The lead investigator was quoted noting consistent blood pressure reductions across a large and diverse group of patients, and also a good safety profile so far.
Good.
He really emphasized the need for new options for these patients whose blood pressure isn't controlled, and that this trial aimed to provide data supporting such a novel therapy.
Okay, and then the scientific paper, the one in the New England Journal of Medicine, gives us a really deep dive into another study, the Advance-HTN trial. What was the setup for that one?
Right. This was a phase 2b study, also randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, the gold standard stuff. It specifically recruited people whose blood pressure was either uncontrolled or truly treatment-resistant. And to make sure they were capturing resistant cases accurately, this is interesting, the study first put everyone on a standardized regimen. Either 2 or 3 specific common blood pressure medications for 3 weeks before they were randomized to get Lorundrostat, or the placebo.
Standardized meds and a lead-in period. That sounds really important for knowing you're dealing with genuine resistant hypertension, not just, someone not taking their pills right or having white coat syndrome.
That's precisely. It adds a layer of rigor, confirming the patient population. They also used 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure monitoring, which measures your blood pressure continuously throughout the day and night as you go about your life. It gives a much more accurate average than just one reading in the clinic.
Right, gets rid of that clinic spike some people get.
Yeah.
So they really took care to identify the right patients. What did these rigorous studies actually find? Let's look at the efficacy results from Advance-HTN, since the paper gives us the specific numbers.
Okay. The main finding, the primary endpoint, was the change in that 24-hour average systolic blood pressure after 12 weeks compared to placebo. The stable 50-milligram dose of Lorundrostat resulted in a significant 7.9 millimeter of mercury reduction compared to placebo.
Wow, almost 8 points.
Yeah. And even a strategy where the dose started at 50 milligrams and could go up to 100 milligrams if needed, that still saw a 6.5 millimeter of mercury reduction, both statistically significant.
Almost an 8 millimeter of mercury reduction on top of the 2 or 3 drugs they were already taking. For someone who's tried multiple things and is still high, that could be a real game changer.
It really could.
Do they see effects quickly? Or did it take the full 12 weeks?
No, they saw effects earlier too. Even at just 4 weeks, the combined Lorundrostat groups showed about a 5.3 millimeter of mercury reduction in that 24-hour average systolic pressure compared to placebo.
Okay, so fairly rapid onset. And did that translate into more people actually reaching a safer blood pressure goal?
It did, yeah. At that 4-week mark, a significantly higher percentage of participants on Lorundrostat reached a systolic blood pressure below 125 millimeters of mercury. It was 41% on the drug versus only 18% in the placebo group.
Wow, more than double. That's a big difference in getting people into a potentially safer range.
Huge difference.
Were there any findings about how different groups of people responded? Anything stand out?
Well, one interesting finding mentioned in the paper was that the blood pressure reduction seemed somewhat greater in those participants who were only on 2 standardized medications before entering the trial compared to those who were already on 3.
Okay.
Also, maybe more importantly, in an exploratory analysis, the blood pressure reduction was found to be similar between Black and white participants.
That's really significant.
It is, particularly because, as the paper notes, Black adults in the United States face a disproportionately high burden of resistant hypertension. So showing similar efficacy is quite important.
Absolutely. That specific finding about Black participants is really key, highlighting the potential for this drug maybe to help address some health disparities. Now, okay, efficacy is one side of the coin. Safety and tolerability are just as crucial, especially with a new drug class.
Yeah.
What did the Advance-HTN trial observe on that front?
The safety profile was, well, generally what you might expect when you target this particular hormonal system, the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system.
Right.
The key side effects seen more often with Lorundrostat were increases in blood potassium levels, that's called hyperkalemia, and also decreases in blood sodium levels, hyponatremia.
Okay, hyperkalemia.
Yeah.
How significant were those potassium increases? Is that a major concern?
It's definitely something to watch. In the study, potassium levels getting high, specifically above 6.0 millimoles per liter, occurred in about 5% of the stable dose group and 7% of the dose adjustment group.
Compared to placebo?
Compared to 0% in the placebo group. So yes, it's a real effect and something that would absolutely need careful monitoring if someone were taking this drug.
Okay. And what about kidney function? That's often a concern with drugs that affect this whole pathway. The paper mentions changes in estimated glomerular filtration rate, or eGFR.
That's right. They did observe decreases in estimated glomerular filtration rate, which, as you said, is a measure of how well your kidneys are filtering waste. The average estimated glomerular filtration rate decreased by about 13% to 15% in the lorundrostat groups after 12 weeks, compared to just a 3% decrease in the placebo group.
A 13 to 15% decrease. That sounds a bit concerning on the surface. Does that indicate kidney damage?
Well, this is where the context is really vital, and the sources explain this quite carefully. A decrease in estimated glomerular filtration rate is actually a very common and often expected effect when you start medications that affect this system.
Oh, okay.
It's frequently related to lowering the pressure within the kidney's own filtering units, the glomeruli. Sometimes this can even be beneficial for the kidney in the long run rather than indicating actual permanent damage.
I see.
The paper also noted they had to use special methods to measure the estimated glomerular filtration rate because lorundrostat can interfere with the standard way it's measured using creatinine.
Right.
And importantly, they looked at a subgroup of participants who stopped the study drug after the trial, and their estimated glomerular filtration rate levels increased again, suggesting the effect seen wasn't permanent damage.
Okay, so that's crucial context. It's more of a functional change related to how the drug works, not necessarily damaging the organ itself, and it seems reversible based on that subgroup data.
That seems to be the interpretation, yes.
Were there any serious safety issues overall, beyond the potassium and kidney function changes?
Serious adverse events did occur in a small number of participants, but the investigators judged them as being related to the trial drug in only 3 participants overall. There was 1 death during the study, unfortunately, but it was deemed unrelated to the drug.
Okay, so based on both the efficacy and these safety profiles seen in the trials, did it give them an idea of maybe the optimal dose to move forward with?
Yes, it seems like the findings from this advanced HTN trial, combined with some earlier studies, suggest that the 50 milligram daily dose might be the sweet spot, offering what looks like maximal blood pressure lowering, but with potentially a lower risk of those potassium increases compared to the higher 100 milligram dose.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's zoom out a bit. Taking all this data from the sources, what does it tell us about the bigger picture here?
Well, what's fascinating, I think, is how clearly these results reinforce the idea that for many, many people with resistant high blood pressure, the underlying problem is indeed this dysregulated aldosterone.
Yeah.
And by directly targeting the production of that hormone, lorundrostat offers a mechanism that seems, well, quite effective in that group.
Which means this drug, if it makes it through phase 3 and gets approved, could be a really important new option for potentially millions of people who currently just can't get their blood pressure under control with existing therapies.
Absolutely. It provides a distinct way to tackle the problem compared to current drugs. It could be a very valuable addition, especially for those folks where aldosterone is clearly a major driver of their high pressure. And as we mentioned, its potential relevance for specific populations, like Black adults who have higher rates of resistant hypertension, is also a really key point the research highlights.
Definitely. Now, looking ahead, good science always acknowledges limitations. What were the limitations of these studies, and what are the next steps for lorundrostat?
Right. The scientific paper itself is upfront about some limitations of the advanced HTN trial. For one, it was relatively short, only 12 weeks of treatment.
Okay.
And notably, there wasn't a head-to-head comparison included between lorundrostat and other existing drugs that target the aldosterone system, like those mineralocorticoid receptor antagonists we mentioned earlier, like spironolactone or eplerenone.
Okay. So we don't yet know precisely how it stacks up against current standard options in a direct comparison study.
Not from this specific trial, no.
So what research is ongoing then? What's next?
Well, that larger phase 3 Launch HTN trial we talked about, its promising initial results are a really significant step towards potential availability down the road. There are also ongoing longer-term studies, open-label extension trials, looking at the effects of lorundrostat over a much longer period, months or years, and continuing to evaluate its impact on kidney function over time. That will be important data.
Yeah, long-term data is key.
And it's also worth mentioning that other drugs in the same class, other aldosterone synthase inhibitors, are being investigated too, not just for hypertension, but potentially for use in conditions like heart failure and chronic kidney disease as well.
Interesting. So that broader research suggests the potential importance of this hormonal pathway goes beyond just blood pressure control.
It certainly seems that way, yeah.
So the key takeaway from this deep dive into the sources seems pretty clear then.
I think so. Lorundrostat represents a really exciting development. It's a novel drug, targets a specific hormonal pathway, and it's shown significant potential to help people with difficult-to-control, resistant high blood pressure who haven't found success with current treatments.
And here's a thought maybe to leave you with. This research really highlights how understanding the specific underlying drivers of complex conditions, like figuring out that aldosterone dysregulation, is key for many with resistant hypertension. How that understanding can lead to highly targeted and potentially much more effective new treatments. It makes you wonder what other conditions, currently treated with maybe broader approaches, might benefit from this kind of deep dive into their specific root causes. What other pathways hold keys?
That's a great question. It really opens the door to a whole lot of future research possibilities across medicine.
Definitely something to think about. And a final but crucial note for you listening. If you or someone you know is struggling with uncontrolled high blood pressure, please remember that discussions about all treatment options, including any new research like what we've discussed today, are always best had with your own healthcare provider.
Absolutely.
This deep dive is really for your information and curiosity.
Always consult with a medical professional for personalized advice regarding your specific health situation.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into these sources, exploring Lorundrostat and the potential for maybe a new era in managing resistant high blood pressure.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.